All right, so you're looking for U.S. green card options, the kind where you don't have to rely on family connections or employer sponsorship, right? And today we are diving deep into two really interesting paths, the EB-1A and the National Interest Waiver.
Ah, so you're thinking about being in control, kind of steering your own immigration journey.
Exactly. Taking the wheel.
I love that. It's fantastic. And, so many people think, oh, it's got to be family or employer. That's it. So it's refreshing that you're exploring these options that are all about your achievements as an individual.
Right. And first up, let's unpack this EB-1A thing.
Okay.
It's for people who are at the top of their game, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we talking Nobel Prize winners, groundbreaking researchers, that level?
It does sound a little intimidating, doesn't it? It's true. The EB-1A is aiming for, the top few percent in any field.
Okay.
But it's not limited to just like those super prestigious awards. Think of it more like, how can we attract those people who've really made a name for themselves, nationally or internationally? Someone who's really achieved that acclaim.
Okay, so not just scientists and researchers then, because I'm looking at this material here and I'm seeing athletes, artists, even business consultants mentioned.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like the key
Is you got to demonstrate what they call extraordinary ability.
Mhm.
And that can look like so many different things. Your work has to be recognized at a very high level,
Yeah.
but it's within your specific field.
Right, right.
Whether it's the arts, the sciences, business, you name it.
So how do you actually prove that, though, that you're in that top percentage? Besides, casually mentioning your Nobel Prize.
Well, that's where those 10 criterias come in.
Okay.
You don't need to meet all 10.
Right.
But usually a strong application, you're hitting at least 3,
Yeah.
and you're backing it up with some rock-solid evidence.
So let's dive into those criteria a bit.
Sure.
What are some that you found in your research that really stand out to you?
One that always comes to mind is published material about the individual. Like, has someone written about you in a professional publication or major media, articles, interviews, even just being featured in an industry magazine, that kind of thing? It shows that people are talking about you and your work.
Right. You're not just good at what you do, but people are talking about how good you are at what you do.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm also seeing judging the work of others.
Yes.
So not just being judged, but doing the judging. What does that look like in a practical sense?
I think that's a great way to show your expertise. So think about things like peer reviewing for academic journals, or being on a grant review panel, or even just formally evaluating other people in your field. It really shows your peers see you as an authority.
So you're painting this picture of someone who's not just, competent, they're leading the way.
They're setting the bar.
What about things like salary? Can that factor into it at all?
It absolutely can. Commanding a high salary is actually one of the criteria.
Oh, interesting.
And, of course, salary, it varies so much from one profession to another.
Of course.
But if you're making a lot more than other people in your field, that shows something.
Yeah.
That says you bring a lot of value.
Yeah, you're worth it.
And don't just throw the number out there. Show how it compares to others. What's the context? What does your salary say about the value that you bring?
Okay, so we've got an impressive salary, publications, judging others' work. This is starting to sound doable even without that Nobel Prize. But I imagine it's not just about checking off boxes, right?
You're absolutely right. You've got to have the evidence to back it all up. It's about the whole picture, the totality of the evidence, they call it. You're not just listing things off. You're presenting a whole case.
Yeah, like you're in court.
Exactly. Like you're going before a judge and jury.
Interesting.
You got to convince them.
You got to be convincing.
You're the real deal.
So the EB-1A, that's for the people at the very top, the superstars, the ones everyone knows. But what if you're not quite there yet? Like, what if you know your work could make a big difference for the U.S., but you haven't quite hit that superstar level of recognition?
Well, that's where the National Interest Waiver comes in.
Yeah.
Or NIW, as it's often called.
Right.
It's all about showing the U.S. government that what you do is so important, so vital to the nation's interests, that they should let you skip those usual requirements. The job offer, the labor certification.
Yeah, national interest, that feels pretty major, right? It's not just like you're making a difference in your local community.
You're right. It's a high bar, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be something that benefits the entire country, not just one particular region or one group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this idea of substantial merit comes in. You have to be able to show that your work has this big potential, this big impact, but on a national scale.
Okay, and I'm looking through these materials, and I see examples about technology, healthcare, even entrepreneurship. It seems like a pretty wide range of fields could potentially qualify.
Absolutely. Think about it. What are the areas where the U.S. really wants to be a global leader? Things like advancements in science and tech, solutions for public health, anything that boosts economic growth. If you can connect what you do to those national priorities, you're off to a great start.
Okay, but actually proving that your work is that important, that it's like crucial to the US, that still seems like a lot, it's
Yeah.
almost intimidating.
Oh, for sure. It can definitely feel that way.
Yeah.
That's why USCIS, they break it down into three main factors. Think of them like the building blocks for your argument.
Okay, so let's break those down one by one.
Okay.
What's the first hurdle we got to clear?
So first, you've got to prove that your work has substantial merit and national importance. We've talked about the national importance part, but substantial merit, that really gets into your achievements, your potential. What makes you stand out? What have you done so far, and how are those accomplishments going to fuel your future contributions? This is where you really need the evidence. Publications, awards, any kind of recognition from top people in your field,
Yeah.
all of that helps to back up what you're saying.
So you're building that track record that really speaks for itself. It's like, look, I've done all these amazing things, and this is just the beginning.
Yes, exactly.
So what's the next thing USCIS looks at?
All right, so the second factor that's all about you, are you well-positioned, is how they put it, to actually achieve everything you're talking about? Because it's one thing to have a great idea,
Right.
but they want to know you're the one who can actually make it happen.
So they're analyzing your experience, your expertise,
Exactly.
your track record, basically, your qualifications.
It's like, can you walk the walk, not
Yeah.
just talk the talk?
Right, because there's that saying, like, past performance is not indicative of future results. But here, it seems like they really do want to see that past performance.
They do. They want to see a pattern, a history of success, of dedication, of pushing the boundaries. Especially for researchers, they want to know, did your past work actually move the field forward? Did it start important conversations, lead to any real advancements?
Okay, so last but not least, factor number 3.
All right, so this is where it all comes together. USCIS wants to know if waiving that job offer requirement, if that's actually beneficial to the United States, are they getting something out of it?
So it's not just about you, and it's not even just about your work.
Right.
It's about how that work fits into the bigger picture, like what does America need?
Yeah, you've got to prove that you're bringing something unique to the table. Even if there are other qualified people in the U.S. who could, theoretically do what you do, your specific perspective, your expertise, that's what's essential for the country to move forward.
It's like you're saying, I'm the missing piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
And I'm noticing a theme here.
But that?
It's all about making those connections. Here's my work. Here's why it matters. Here's why it matters to the U.S. specifically.
You got it. And I will say, lately, there's been a real emphasis on STEM fields. Science, technology, engineering, math. The government knows the areas are just absolutely crucial for the nation to stay competitive, to stay secure. So researchers in those fields, they're often in a very good position when they apply for the NIW.
So we talked about the EB-1A. We talked about the NIW. Two pretty amazing options, but definitely two distinct paths.
For sure.
So if you're thinking about these options, how do you even begin to choose? Like, which one is right for me?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right.
But the good news is you don't always have to choose.
Oh.
Depending on, your situation, how strong your evidence is, it might make sense to apply for both at the same time.
Oh, interesting. So it's not like an either-or.
Not necessarily.
Now, I'm also seeing here that both of these categories, they're eligible for something called premium processing. Can you explain what that is? Because I know waiting for a decision, that can be like the hardest part.
Absolutely. Premium processing, you can think of it like the express lane.
Okay.
You pay an extra fee, and USCIS will prioritize your case. They'll process it a lot faster.
How much faster are we talking?
So for the EB-1A, it's within 15 calendar days.
Wow.
And for the NIW, it's 45 calendar days.
So way faster.
Much faster. And, of course, it doesn't guarantee you'll be approved.
Right.
But just knowing that things are moving, that could be huge.
Huge, for sure.
Especially with immigration, where things can take a long time.
Absolutely. Now, I know your research also mentioned the visa bulletin, and there's this whole thing about backlogs. How does that play into everything?
That's a really good point, and it's something that often gets overlooked.
Yeah.
So the visa bulletin, it's basically this monthly publication from the U.S. Department of State.
Okay.
And it tells you when visa numbers are actually available for different categories.
So even if your application gets approved, you might still have to wait depending on what country you're from and the type of visa.
Unfortunately, yes, it's like a traffic controller.
I see.
They're managing the flow, making sure there's room for everyone.
So always check the visa bulletin.
Always a good idea. Those wait times can really fluctuate.
So to bring it back to the EB-1A and the NIW, is there a difference there in terms of wait times?
There can be. Historically, the EB-1A, because it's a first preference category, those have had shorter wait times, fewer backlogs, compared to the NIW, which is a second preference category.
Okay, so that's another factor to keep in mind.
Definitely.
So we've talked about premium processing, visa backlogs, but let's get down to it. What about the actual evidence? What are the key differences there between the two paths?
Right, so remember those 10 criteria for the EB-1A? It's much more about meeting those benchmarks, showing you check at least 3 of those boxes. The NIW is a little different. It's less about checking boxes and more about really making your case, showing the impact of your work, the potential, and how it will benefit the U.S.
So with the EB-1A, you're proving you've already arrived. You're already a leader.
Yes.
And with the NIW, it's more about what you're going to do in the future.
It's forward-looking. That's a good way to put it.
And what about the geographic focus? Is there a difference there too?
Absolutely. The EB-1A, they look at achievements and recognition on a national, even international level. The NIW is very specific. It has to benefit the United States.
So if your work has mostly been in your home country, but now you're focused on how you can use that experience to help the U.S., the NIW might be the way to go.
It could be.
This is complicated stuff.
It is, which is why it's so important to do your research, talk to the experts.
Absolutely. This has been a true deep dive, exploring the EB-1A and the National Interest Waiver, 2 really interesting paths to a U.S. green card that really put you in control.
I think that's what's so exciting about these options.
Right. It's all about what you bring to the table. And speaking of bringing things to the table, your research left us with a really interesting question. What about your spouse? Could they be eligible for a completely different category, like a visa for nurses or investors, even the diversity visa lottery?
It's true. Sometimes it's about looking at the whole picture, all the possibilities for you and your loved ones.
Exactly. We hope this deep dive has given you the information you need to start exploring your options. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Until next time, happy researching.